All right. Good evening, Facebook, YouTube, really YouTube. Good evening, my YouTube family. Good evening. Good evening. It is New Year's Eve. Happy New Year's, everybody. I know 2020 has been something for the history books, right? So happy New Year's, everybody. Give everybody a few minutes to get on in here. Tonight is our part two of Sapelo Island, the history of Sapelo Island. We're going to bring Mr. Reginald Hall in just a few minutes. But I'm going to start out the top of this hour with part two of a three-part video. And we'll bring Mr. Reginald in and we'll go into part three as well. But I wanted to really get you to understand more about Sapelo Island, its rich history, the culture. It is, the homeland to the descendants that traveled across the waters right to directly to Sapelo Island, and to have these lands now be stolen. We're watching gentrification all across this country, but to watch it in real time is, we're living this. We're absolutely living this. So I'm going to bring in part two. Share my screen with you. Let me bring in part two, and we're going to watch part two, and then we'll bring Mr. Reginald Hall in.
When the first Baptist minister came this way to organize a Christian church, nobody rushed to join that right away. According to the history at my church, the first African Baptist church that was organized, it started in 65, formally organized in 1866. Only about a dozen people were baptized that first year, so you had literally hundreds of people here. So if everybody wanted to embrace that right away, then it would have been, we would have baptized a lot more in that first time.
Eventually, the slaves combined many of their African religious beliefs and practices with those of Christianity and developed their own way of worship.
I will shout, hallelujah. I will shout, oh Lord. I will shout, hallelujah, oh Lord. For you are the source of my supply.
This is a typical example of a praise house building. This one is active now, but it got started on the plantation, right on the edge of the plantation of during slavery. People will enter these buildings and they're allowed to worship.
Slave communities used praise as a means of worship and as a means of communicating secret messages to each other.
There were some beautiful sermons preached from the praise house, messages that actually caused people to liberate themselves. And people would send messages through their sermons.
So now while we're singing and we're shouting, it's providing spiritual covering. It's also providing this covering of sound so that as a person is going out into the wilderness, if some trouble comes up, they shouldn't be able to hear them as easily. If for some reason there's a patty roller or there's some type of buckra they out trying to look for one of us to get away, then they won't necessarily hear you either. And so we knew what was going on all the while. But not only in our songs with the code, our very language is that, so that we could always commune with one another and communicate with one another, even in the presence of everybody else.
And so you had your leaders, who are the elders. Most of the time, they're older people. The male is always in charge. The women were always the people who set the sounds and set the beat for the sound. And at the end of doing singing, there was no music. So they had to form their own music, their own clap, and that hand beat and the foot stomp.
I will shout, hallelujah, oh Lord.
Jonathan Green is an internationally acclaimed artist. His vibrant paintings celebrating his Gullah heritage, have been featured in movies, magazines, and museums around the world.
The area was so inspirational for me, but as a child, you don't realize how important it is. And it wasn't until I went to the Art Institute, studied the European masters, and then met people from abroad. And one of the people I met encouraged me to come to Switzerland. And I thought, oh, it's an opportunity to go abroad. But going to Switzerland, I met the artist, and all of the artists that I met in Switzerland were doing paintings about things they knew. And it seemed for me that their palette was endless. They never had to really think much about what they were painting. And when I returned to the United States, I started looking around and I thought, well, I should be drawing the marsh and landscape and the people. I've been painting basically scenes about my hometown and my environment, and it's just endless. I never have to think of subject matters. I never have to study anything else because it's all readily available. The way of life as we know it is disappearing fast. Not that the population of people are disappearing, but just the importance of the culture. And I feel that so many of the young people today, if they don't have a sense of their culture, they're not going to have much of a future. My grandmother and mother always said to me that the importance of my life is to paint and to paint about my culture, and so that something will be left behind for people to understand.
Arthur Gilbert is a local woodcarver whose African-inspired designs have won national attention.
Getting into wood carving way back from my child days almost. I used to make certain things to play with. We had to make it, they had to carve it.
The state of Georgia has recognized Gilbert as a master craftsman and has awarded him grants to teach wood carving as a folk art.
I just love to carve. And when I get an idea, I stick with it until I be successful with it. I feel good. I start beat up some old hymn and start singing my hymns and carving, and I'm happy.
Gilbert's intricately detailed walking sticks are among his coveted signature pieces.
It's a great thing. I wish that I could get at least 15 or 20 more to sit down and run off at the mouth and just cut and cut. It's a great thing. It's a peace of mind to sit down and whittle and cut and beat and come up with something that you can see what you have accomplished. My tools should never be forgotten.
Sapelo Island, Georgia, is one of the last remaining intact Geechee communities within the Gullah Geechee Nation. Situated 60 miles south of Savannah, the 4-mile-wide and 10-mile-long Barrier Island has been described as a 30-minute ferry ride back into Africa and time. The deep emotional connection between the Gullah and Geechee people and the land is eloquently expressed in this excerpted piece by Sapelo Island resident Cornelia Bailey.
I am Sapelo. And all the hundreds of others who are descendants. We who remain here is Sapelo.
To us, this was heaven. People come often and ask me, they said, when you was growing up, what did you miss as a child? And I said, nothing.
I never lost my love for Sapelo Island. Just the culture, the beaches, the peace and tranquility, the vegetation. I look forward to it every day.
I started doing tours because I was riding with my mother. She was doing tours. I learned different things every time I tell a tour. I learned a different thing that I didn't know before. So the tour after them, they get more information because the more I do it, the more I learn. This blue building over here on the left that you see was an old school building that was used for kids in the community. It's no longer used for a school anymore because it was destroyed by the hurricane. So now it's used for a computer lab and a library.
We are one, bound by the spirit of an island.
That pine tree is doing well. It's producing cones, and its lifeblood is coming from the oak.
And Balali the slave, bound by high tide, fields, gossips, smoked mullet, and our faith.
Sapelo is a prototype sea island, the prototype of what these other islands were like. St. Helena Island, Hilton Head Island, Dapaski Island. Before the advent of resort development on these other islands were similarly situated as Sapelo is, where people were still using those basic cultural assets that we brought from West Africa, where people maintained self-sufficiency and also promoted self-sufficiency.
Careful, hold tight now. I ain't got no brakes. Hold tight. So where are we going? To the beach. What's that? To the beach. Indigo Beach.
George Walker is on his way to get dinner, the same way his ancestors have been getting dinner for generations.
When you go to Sapelo and see people fishing with the fish nets and casting the fish nets, fishing on the beach, you're looking at West Africa, and even in today's world.
Look here. There's a log right there. See a log yonder? Go right alongside that log. And I want you to go as far as you could. I'm coming. I'll give you a hand in a minute. Okay, we walk. Darryl, come here. You hold this pole. Keep the pole straight. Don't let it drag the bottom. Just keep off the bottom like that. And help him push. And he pull. You going up? Before you can go. I'll be in a minute. Give you a hand.
The people of Sapelo live by a spiritual code that has enabled them to survive against the odds. They have a deep and abiding respect for nature and an understanding of their relationship to it. With harmony as their guiding philosophy, the Gullah and Geechee people believe that in nature, nothing is wasted, nothing is exploited, and nothing is abused.
Big shot right there. Big shot? Yeah. Where? In the net? In the net? Yeah, I'm throwing that in there. Right now, it's good fishing now, summertime. We fish every time the tide is right. One thing I love living on here, you get fresh seafood that you can't get. And on the market, you got like a pocket full of money. You can come out here and get fresh seafood for nothing.
Our existence here on Sapelo starts in the connection from the slave families that were brought to this area. The most famous and documented slave that's in Georgia history that I know of and we're proud of is Buala Muhammad. Buala Muhammad was a very famous slave because he spoke many languages. He spoke and wrote in Arabic and English and 5 different languages. He had 8 daughters and over 12 sons. The sons were naturally from that time sold as slaves to other slave families, but most of the daughters were kept here. We have over 44 families that have came from those 8 daughters of Buala Muhammad.
The ability to adapt is what defines the genesis of the Gullah Geechee culture. But what about its future? Since the 1960s, more and more developers are moving in and claiming the shoreline. Exclusive resorts and high-priced condominiums, as seen on Hilton Head, are trumpeting in a new and imposing future for the nation.
Well, we've survived because we had to. You see these survival shows on television nowadays, and I often chuckle when I watch them because I lived it. Everybody had responsibility, and that responsibility was shared responsibility because we've got an influx now of a different kind of culture that is relying on more things than on self and people. That is causing some strife among Gullah people.
So we must keep people away whose interest is not the survival of the culture, but whose interest is purely financial.
We're trying to hold on to what we got because if the land goes, so does the people. I mean, I cannot function in the middle of Brooklyn doing the same thing I'm doing down here.
Mr. Reginald, welcome to the broadcast, sir. Can you turn your camera on? Can you hear me, sir? Uh-oh. Mr. Reginald, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we have some back feed. You got to turn off whatever you're listening to in the background. Turn your camera on, please. You have a black screen, sir. Can you hear us? Uh-oh. Well, he'll be back, guys. He is having some technical difficulties, but I want to thank you guys for joining me tonight on this broadcast as we really dive into the history of Sapelo Island. I think he's back, y'all. Let's see. Mr. Reginald, can you hear us? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir, we can. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me? He's having some serious technical difficulties. But I really wanted to give you some of the history. I told you on the last broadcast that I'm Geechee. I am from the coast of Georgia. My family is more inland, but I am definitely from that Geechee culture. Oh, he might have some internet now. Sir, can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
Good. Yes, I can.
Awesome. Awesome. Can you see me at all or no?
You're frozen on my screen.
No worries, as long as you can hear us. So I just wanted to thank you again for joining us tonight to share the stories of Sapelo Island, to share the rich history of Sapelo Island, and to share the litigations that are happening to help save the lands of Sapelo Island. So thank you for joining us, sir.
Well, thank you for having me. Let me turn this down here. If we start talking about the litigation itself, what we've had an opportunity to do is understand some federal violations. In those understandings of those federal violations, we had the ability to attract a wonderful law firm with some wonderful lawyers. I would dare to venture we have about 6 lawyers that have been on the case since we've started. These lawyers have it as knowledge that, if anything else, discriminatory rights can be resolved. Now, we're just talking about in the reference point of what I'm doing on Sapelo Island. So discrimination, the lack of services per our taxes. Can you still hear me okay?
Yes, sir, we can hear you just fine. Keep going.
The lack of services per our taxes and the overall quality of life diminishment. When you think of discrimination, it's not just a broad umbrella, you're looking at handicap parking, you're looking at docks that have not been maintained properly as other docks have around other islands. So we're using the template that Dr. King used. If the state can't handle it, the county can't handle it, and there's no local jurisdiction in place on Sapelo Island, then let's go to the federal government. At the time that I started this, we had the wonderful President and First Lady in the office for the 2 terms, President Obama, First Lady Obama, and the call was being answered. It wasn't one time that I had an ability to write an email or pick up a phone to one of the designees per the White House and have an opportunity to create the solution at that moment. So what does that mean? I brought 9 federal agencies to the island on the same ferry on the same day, where over 130 family members were able to now voice the grievance and or disruption, the dissatisfaction of how we're being handled. And now that's an important word, because not just through mistreatment, but how you're handled. When you live on a barrier island in the state of Georgia and you're disconnected from what is known as the mainland by 7.9 miles of water, you have less of an opportunity for these type of, I would say, recovery options to happen. But because we decided as the Raccoon Hall Community Development Corporation to dig in and figure out what is the proper path, method, what is the proper alignment to understanding recovery. Well, right now, we are out over 4,000 acres of land stolen on Sapelo. But the vestige of land that is most important to us at this time is called Raccoon Bluff. You watch the video, Mr. Walker told you when you walk into those waters with that net, you're walking in African waters. You're doing the African, I don't want to say the African thing, but you're doing the African understanding of survival. Now, we dragged that net 150, 300 feet out in the water today. So from all of the generations that have come and gone, we're still practicing the original way. If you understand what they said in that video as the lands are most important for the survival of not just the people, but the culture. Because without the people, the culture's gone. Well, without the lands, the people are gone. So we're in an effort right now of reclaiming 666 acres that of those 44 families that you heard about on the video, 20 families went into Raccoon Bluff, north end of the island, higher ground, waterfront property. Those 20 families put their money together and paid $5,000 to own 33 acres apiece, which is mathematically equated to 666 acres. But the state of Georgia is now claiming the lands against us. There are adverse possession laws. There are right of ownership laws. And inside of both of those, there has to be some form of clear title and or deed understanding. Well, because we know there's no clear title and because we know we held those deeds from 1871 until today, that's our land. We have to have the land. We're looking at the possibilities of building the museum on Sapelo Island, building the Land Recovery Institute on Sapelo Island. How can we do that? I've already recovered land on Sapelo Island for my family members. So it's not a process that I'm guessing about. We can build the conference center, interactive theater. And when you think of the building, I'm not talking about skyscraping. I'm talking about cottage style industry, LEED platinum, that would be conducive to the beautiful environment that has been this island that we know is documented thousands of years ago with the Gual brothers. So when we were brought to this island, you heard Ronald say, Mr. Johnson on the video say, there were 7 daughters brought to Sapelo and 12 sons left behind. My father and his bloodline are all spawn of those 7 daughters. So if we look at our genealogy study, we have the largest genealogy study of one black family in the United States of America, the largest by far. These things are important. We can take you to where our great ancestors lie in a certain part of the cemetery known as behavior. We can take you to the lands that we know our people survived and ate from. We can still walk you on the land that the state has mowed down our headstones so that we can't find a certain number of ancestors who still lie dormant in the ground and are waiting on us to come and reclaim them. Not just the land, the people who lie within those land are waiting on their descendants to reclaim them, to let them have the ability of recognition of having been on this earth. So when we look at recovery, it's broad. But when we look at the systems in place that we've created through this Community Development Corporation, which is just a name, it's just a vehicle to say, here goes the data, here goes the assessment, here goes the violations, and here goes now the legal teams that can come in on our side and say why this cannot happen. But this just isn't for Sapelo. Sister Tamara, this is for the world. And it's just a template because the successes that we've already gained have never happened in the United States of America. We've won the largest tax case in the United States as one black family against a county who had to return our money only because the feds and the lawyers came in. That's why this is important. And if our tribe gets together right now, we can planet rock off of here, off of oppression, off of suppression, off of the foot on our neck that has always held us bound, but for the land. The indigenous population can only be called indigenous because it lives from the land. The population is connected to the land. We still eat our barbecue from the oak wood that we cut down and cure for years and decades. I have oak wood in my house that has been curing since my grandfather was alive, passed in 1967. Then we take that cured wood and we light it with a natural tree that grows on the island called fat lighter. We don't use the outside chemical laced product. This is natural. And once this development is completed, all of the families come home, but then it becomes the mecca of our tribe to come before you go home to the motherland. Get a true study of what we know as not just hunter-gatherers, but as thinking men and women. Please, Sister Tamara, I know you want to do the next part of the video.
I said you're on a roll. I didn't want to stop you, but I do want to do the next video, and I want to bring you back in.
Yes.
Share my screen, everybody.
Still have our deeds, and today we have to fight issues in court under situations that we call AS.
Uh-oh. We had a little freeze there.
Because we got the cable where they show who we've been. And so we are still the heirs to this land, and this is our legacy. This is our family. Their blood, their bones, their sweat, the placenta, even from the babies that were birthed here, is in this soil. And so for someone to just want to buy it or tell us, well, you could live somewhere else. Well, you're right. We could live somewhere else, but what quality of life would we have?
You take away the land, you take away the culture, you take away the history, and it's not going to work. So hence goes everything. So we need the land in order to hold on to who we are. The pride, the culture, the history, and everything goes together.
Land value is going up, and people are using it now as a commodity because cash is needed. And we have less time now with our family because everybody is out trying to get enough cash to get the things we want instead of what we need.
We must have control of what occur in the community.
Several efforts to preserve the Gullah Geechee culture are being made both individually.
This is a tradition that came from Africa because they used to make these baskets, much bigger baskets for working in the fields and taking stuff to the market. When my son was in high school and my daughter both was in high school, and they like to go buy those $70, $80 pair of shoes, make a basket to buy your shoes. and also I want them to learn how to do this also.
And collectively, organizations like SICARS on Sapelo Island and the South Carolina Coastal Community Development Corporation on St. Helena Island are just two such organizations.
Well, I think part of what we do is we look at the culture of food in the community. We look at how we can come together as a community and help more people create businesses around food and come up with a central label that will represent the Gullah Geechee Nation and use that as a marketing niche.
We practice working with the baskets. We still cast nets. We still build boats and the things that the early slaves brought to this country, the same traditions and things we did to survive then. We still practice those things as part of a way of life here on the island.
Take everything old and make it new again. My thing is you have to go back in order to go forward. So we have to take all the resources from our generations back and then bring it forward and make it an economic base. So what we need to do is take everything that we learned, syrup making, dried fish, making cast net by hand, making rowboats, making toys for our children, the way we cook. Those are the things that we introduce to the outside world and make a living from it. And so we're still holding on to your integrity, your pride, your history, your culture, and you're making some money and you can stay.
There's still some semblance of that value here in these islands because people still have that kinship and they have the respect of the elders. And as long as the elders can continuously gain that respect and maintain that respect, we'll probably have a semblance of survival still.
The fate of the Gullah Geechee Nation is still unknown. But what is known is that the history and contributions of this culture provide a living link to the past.
When all that spirit been together and walk so, it have been just dry long so. See, they been together so this year day would have come. And we would have owned all of this year. And we would have lived together once again. It ain't been gonna be no more Madaba daddy or nothing Bakra man, nothing like that. Because this year,
So, I'm going to ask God, let me live 100 years. A friend said, you are 100? She said, yes. So she went to bed that night. She got ready to bed. She got in her bed. She said, I'm praying. She asked God, we have people that live other places and they can't wait to come back home. As soon as they come back home visiting, they take off their shoes. They want to go clamming. They want to go fishing. They want some peas and rice. They want some smoked mullet. So even though they're in the city, as soon as they come back, it reverts. And we don't want to lose that. And they know that they come back, there's land for them to put their feet on that belongs to them.
I think there are lessons here. There are lessons where people valued family and kinship as well as caring about one another. And that was necessary because of the fact that we were isolated and we had to rely on what we knew, traditions from West Africa, customs from West Africa, even foodways. And we passed that along and we shared that with whomever needed it. And so we met the needs together. That's one lesson. Secondly, the lesson of economic development, maintain land ownership, produce their own foods, produced all of the things that they needed for life. How we use it to together in terms of a cooperatively together. Nobody owned the land; people shared land, and the new economy has caused us to change that. But most of the time, land was used as people needed it. I think the other lesson is education, how we learn, and who we learn from. Everybody who can teach taught, and everybody tried to learn what they needed to learn in order to make progress.
To lose this culture would be to lose a piece of American history, and as many believe, to dishonor a people for a second time.
So even now, when people come into the Gullah Geechee Nation and they try to figure out how come we seem like we're so joyful? How come we seem like we're so happy all the time? And they're like, oh, y'all still sing all them old songs. Well, those old songs are new songs in our soul and in our spirit because they always do the same thing they did for our ancestors who created the spirituals that are now South Carolina state music. They help to revive you. They help to keep you in that continuum because nothing is about just this moment. Everything is about what happened before and what is coming in the future. Even now, the Gullah Geechee Nation tree is bodies intertwined because we know we can never survive without that interconnection. We are that fruit that grows off that tree. So if we know the roots are ailing and we want more fruit in the future, then we have to dig into the past. We have to know our story. And who better to tell our own story than our own people? And so that we know through all the work that we're doing, who we da down ya, and we know we da there ya, we da been ya, and we ain't going nowhere.
This road has not been easy, forged from shame.
Mr. Reginald.
You can hear me okay?
Yes, sir, we can.
Wonderful.
I mean, just watching those videos, that was the third video of a 3-part series that I wanted to share with our audience because I really want them to really feel this and be connected to this. You know, just to see a whole island that once was inhabited by an entire family be taken away by the government and by the powers that be. It's heartbreaking.
I was sitting on there counting my elders on there. Do you not know I counted 6 departed already since I started this that was on that video? So between my father, my aunts, my cousins, 6 of them on that video already passed away with an unsurety of what the going to happen on Sapelo Island. What the heck is going to happen on Sapelo Island? Now, this is what I'm fighting for. You know, we have been known to be spiritual. So in that spirituality that I know we've practiced on Sapelo, the ancestors are important. But if they are not at peace with knowing what's going to happen to their offsprings, their descendants, their children, their grandchildren, and 6 generations back on the island, well, how can you have any rest or peace? So I wrote a couple of notes on that last one because I thought this was important. You heard Queen Quet talk about heirs' property rights. Well, you got to have a lot of money to heirs' property rights. And when you start the families infighting because they can't come along with who truly should get what, then you have what is known as partitioning. Partitioning is in the courts, and you know, when you start partitioning, you're paying lawyers and judges' fees and all those, you know, well, not judges' fees, but you know what I'm saying. if you go back to what was said in the video, you're looking at the food. Well, who gonna ever make red beans and rice like we do again if you don't keep it alive? I have beans in my freezer that have been there for years. And those beans are waiting for me to plant them because we only usually harvest them for the holidays. Right now, my grandmother would be fixing her red beans and rice, about ready to go to bed and get ready for the holiday. Matter of fact, my grandmother passed today. On New Year's Eve, my grandmother passed away on her knees in the bedroom that I sleep in. When I go home to her house, she passed away on her knees, praying her way into the new year. Now, that's a true story. On the first day of the year, 1987. True story. When I tell you I just left there the week before, we spent a wonderful time together. So the ancestors run in different ways. But today, if you look at what Mr. Campbell said, the brother from South Carolina, he said, we are marketing to survive. Now, that for the first time of all the times I've seen this video, which was very seldom published until I went to Chicago, Illinois to get it, I never listened that we're marketing in the world to survive. Not marketing to make money, not marketing to grow the business. We're marketing to survive. That's horrible. Maintain land ownership. When you have the land speculators who have no true feeling that come in and want that land, it's impossible for us lowered economic, lowered educated people to understand how not to lose it. And this is the Land Recovery Institute on Sapelo Island that we can have built state of the art to make sure people from around the country and the world can come and see the model of understanding land ownership rights. The man on the video, Mr. Campbell, told you without the education, well, we didn't have time to get educated in land ownership rights, barely had time to get educated in math. So if we figure out what does it take? What does it take to build the nation right now as our tribe and start with one place, Sapelo Island? All of a sudden, you start with this place that makes the proof that we can begin. Let's do it. I see some brothers on here wanting to ask some questions, Sister Tamara. What should we do?
I'm waiting on the questions. Anybody has any questions, any comments, anything you want to say to our guest this evening? You know, like I say, this is when I met Mr. Hall, which has probably been about a year ago. I want to say maybe about a year ago, Mr. Hall. I was introduced to you.
About that. Yes, ma'am.
And this story has so captured me that I'm glad that we remained in contact. You know, I really am. This question is are you working alongside ADOS Atlanta to get his message out? ADOS Atlanta doesn't know him.
No.
ADOS Atlanta. That's a whole nother. Maybe they can get to know him, but the ADOS Atlanta is still trying to do their own thing. So Mr. Hall is 13 years in the making with his work. So we need to continue to help him make sure that he can recover these lands of Sapelo Island, make sure that you know, his family's history and their legacy isn't lost with the state and the, you know, land grabbing and the powers that be land grabbing. We got to help him. We got to help him. So I wanted to bring you to the broadcast tonight just to share your story and to really get people to see what is continuing to happen to us as a people in this country.
That website that you have listed, Sister Tamara, has all of the information you could possibly need to understanding not just the plight on Sapelo, but the plight of land ownership. I got surveys on there. I take you straight to Q Public. You hit that Q Public. It's in every city in every state It's called Q Public. That's how you find out about your land. Once you look at that Q Public and start to study it, not only do you find out about your land, but you find out how to look at your neighbor's land or land in the next state, or start the land conversation with our families and let them understand how to look at these lands. One thing about land, we know they're not making no more. If we take a moment, and I'm just saying, if we take one moment to believe in ourselves of having something that can truly make the change for our tribes. You know, when we look at what the others do, they pass land to their generations. When you have an opportunity to possibly get your land resolved and out of the hands of others, we have an opportunity to bring others in to not just economically develop, agriculturally develop, environmentally develop, but there's opportunities for those who are still in diapers. I got family members I take to the island and they bring the babies to the dirt and understand how to not just feed ourselves, but have an opportunity of an abundance to feed others. I'm
Mr. Reginald, we have a comment. He says, my family has 80 acres of air property in Alabama, and we can't do anything with it.
I'm gonna say I hear your question and your statement, but the question in there is what can we do with it? You believe you can't do anything with it unless it's under some type of treaty with the government that says they're eminent domaining it. There are so many methods. And I'm sorry, DTB. There's so many methods that you could take as an opportunity of learning from that website, raccoonhog.com. I'm seeing that, brother. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Scrolling through. Go ahead. I'm just scrolling through the site so people can get a chance to see the pages. Go ahead. You can continue.
Well, as I'm seeing, Brother Reed, he would like to organize ADOS to do a weekly action item to put politicians on notice about issues. Brother Reed, I have been to everyone underneath that gold dome, and we are actively pursuing who can start our public hearing in the reference point of Sapelo Island Heritage Authority and the question about Raccoon Bluff 666 acres. In the last part of the Twitter blast comment, man, if we get this thing out on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, anything that could socially put us throughout the country and the world, I know if you have a little inkling of preservation in your heart, people gonna listen. I brought people all the way from the United Emirates, all the way from Asia, Egypt. I've taken them in my vehicle, fed them in my home, because a group of about 7 other countries with their public policy leaders came to ask, how are you all doing this? You know, I tell everybody first, we're doing it through the ancestral calling. Secondly, we know the Most High has grace on us. We know this because there's no way in the world in 2020 that we're supposed to be able to fight back and win. You know, it's just not supposed to happen. Again, we just settled the state part of our case and are now leading into the opposition, we just filed our opposition for summary judgment against the county. And the things that have happened to us over the 51 years that I have on record with paperwork, it shows a racketeering conspiracy and an opportunity for others to collaborate and scheme to deprive us of not just our land ownership rights, our tax dollar rights, not just our tax dollar rights, our quality of life rights. I always say to a part of the prayer that I do, please just let them leave us alone. I mean us, the tribe, the people. Please.
You want to Charlie Jacobs, he says, as a trustee of 16 plus acres in Florida, the air property had a toll of 44 people with a direct interest. You have to do the right thing on behalf of the family.
That's right. That's right, Brother Jacobs. See, the problem that everybody else forgets when we do these videos or things such as this nature, it might just be me sitting here talking, but I have 237 family members on record that are standing behind me to make sure that the success of this process has a positive outcome. And when you say on behalf of the family, I know I may have just been maybe have been heard talking about my family, but Brother Jacobs, we all family. So on my website, you can take a survey and give us your information. And we have access right now to a number of lawyers, public policy professionals. I have a number of psychologists that I'm talking to. See, when you look at this land loss, you're looking at a psychological disruption. The brother Emery Carter on the video said, you know, when you have to move away from home, that's how much time you're not spending with your family to go out here and hustle up a dollar. But yet home had millions of dollars right under your feet. Well, let's take an opportunity to make sure that the millions of dollars under our feet start being recognized, not just by the others, but by us. We have to put ourselves in our own shoes for a minute, stand up straight, start the research, start talking to our family members. The way I got most of my information was through my elders, through my cousins who lived on the island full time all their lives. They're the ones that brought me up to date 13 years ago, even though I've been there for 54 years and hopefully counting. We have to depend on each other in a battle against such a large entity such as the oppressor. And I use that word because I don't ever want to not make sure we recognize the brothers before us who have fought the same fight. And you can go back and look at Uncle Malcolm's speeches and see how many times he called the oppressor the oppressor. Let's not dilute the language. Once we stop the bleeding, you understand? Once we stop the bleeding, we can then begin to heal. But we haven't even begun to stop the bleeding. Well, our bleeding on Sapelo Island has begun to stop. I've now got my hands on a suture, and I believe this suture inside of this county obligation in which we're heading towards this federal court process is going to change things for 159 counties throughout the state of Georgia. Now, I believe that. Then we go to the next state. Please, Sister Tamara.
No, you're good. I'm scrolling through the site. I know you can't see. I'm frozen on your end, but I'm just scrolling through the site as you're
No,
talking, so
I'm
people
watching
can.
this phone, so I'm watching you. I'm watching you live now. So,
Okay,
just,
okay. I'm just scrolling through so
okay.
people can
Well,
see.
let me say one more thing then. Right now, in our changing of the guard, we now are having $6.8 million spent to build our new docks on Sapelo Island. The marshland is what we call it. Over $2 million spent on the mainland docks to come into compliance and to say, hey, the Fed said you can't keep doing this. The state has now built homes for my family members who had no homes that worked for them, who was at first allowing the Caucasians to live in the homes. Well, the state has now put a new water tank on the island, but the water tank is important, but it still is not sufficient because the same water lines that the old water tank ran through, the new water tank runs right through the old lines. So when you hear of a neighborhood, a community, you know within your own community how many problems you could possibly have. Well, imagine living on a barrier island in the state of Georgia. I got young family members that don't have jobs on the mainland and want to come home and figure out how to get an entrepreneurial based business up and running. You know, when we finish this development, the library, it is sitting in a trailer. You saw that. My father went to school in that same trailer in the 6th grade in the 1940s, late 1930s. It's the same trailer, but yet we're under a federal Three Rivers program. For those that don't live in Georgia and live on the East Coast, how can you help? The best way is to assist us in the process of collecting the on the East Coast. How can you help? Hold on. The best way to assist out of any other state is to get the message out. There's a group of people down in Georgia, our tribe, and that group of people needs to get the message out. Secondly, I'm talking to at least 9 to 12 law firms in the last 3-4 months. Most of these law firms know that we're fighting the state of Georgia. It's going to cost us $6 to $10 million. And I got to tell the truth about the numbers. It's going to cost us $6 to $10 million to possibly fight this state of Georgia unless public opinion sways the state to say, hey, we can't look like this out in the public. We can't look like this out in the public. So if the opportunity rises and we have the possibility of collecting the funds where the lawyers say, okay, these people have the funds, we'll say there's a certain retainer. How far can we get to not using those funds because public opinion is beginning to sway the masses? With this election coming up, Sister Tamara, we know that we might have a possibility of going blue because all I ever been fighting is red for 13 years. But the color might not make the difference. It's the person behind the legislation that says, I'm going to stand up. If we take this opportunity to say the funding is toward lawyers, well, we also have a 22-month delivery conceptual plan in our federal lawsuit where the state has to have a public hearing for 25 acres to be delivered to the corporation to become that 25 acres for the museums, for the Walk of the 44 Families. I have every single name of the descendants of the original 44 families in that genealogical study. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to ever come to anybody and talk about my opinions. What I'm talking about is a 13-year data collection, research of the facts on paper. Those facts say to the law firm that's assisting us now, those facts say, Mr. Hall has this on paper, we're going to take this case, and they took it on in 2012. I've had 5 family members who now I've given the reference to lawyers for, who have all been able to amicably resolve their situations on Sapelo Island. These are the processes, these are the steps, and there are phases. But this 25 acres, I got 22 months to develop a conceptual plan and deliver it in a public hearing to the state of Georgia's governor and Department of Natural Resources commissioner. The conceptual plan for the 25 acres is going to cost me no less than $500,000 because it's a true digital layout. If you look at what they're doing in South Carolina, there is a digital layout of the new AAI, African American Museum. If you go to DC, the same thing, this digital layout. I got to do the same thing to make it real for the people who can hear what we're saying and then see what we're saying as a conceptual plan, and I don't have to have a feasibility study. That's the most important part that I was able to get in the agreement under federal rule. I don't have to have a feasibility study, which would cost another $1 million. We're just looking for our hands to be up, to be left alone, and to bring all of our tribe from around the country and then the world to Sapelo Island, Sister Tamara. I'm cognizant of your time, ma'am.
So I'm just going to ask my YouTube family, those of you that have, followed me along the way on my journey to the United States Senate. My passion and my love is real for our people. And, you know, like I said, I met Mr. Reginald Hall about a year ago, and he didn't let go, and neither did I. We just stayed connected because I didn't know, you know, we don't know where this journey is going to take either one of us, but I know he needs our support, he needs our help, and he's done this, like I said, I mean, what, 13 years, Mr. Reginald, 13 years you have been doing a lot of groundwork, going back and forth. A lot of things have happened to this man along the way, but he has stayed in the fight. And whatever we can do to help him, you know, no donation is too small. Something reoccurring would be great. Whatever you can give it continuously. This man has definitely the next 2 years to get this right. And whatever we can do to help him, let's stand strong and let's stand together and let's help Mr. Reginald. And let's save Raccoon Hog and let's save Sapelo Island.
Sister Tamara,
the land is so important.
The brother got a great point. Brother Reed asked, can we write letters to law firms to show them you have thousands of people behind you? Well, you know, to do something like that, brother, we would have to make sure that the thousands of people are behind us and have some type of, I guess, what you would call a, not sign-in sheet, but what am I trying to say, sister? Everybody, you know, the signature sheet with that many people. But the other part of that is, I'm sorry?
Like a petition? Like, what are you saying?
Yes, a petition. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Just to show, and not petitioning the corporations or the private entities that may want to assist us in this process, but something that says to them, hey, we believe in this. You know, I do have some people that I know I'm working with as lawyers, and we're looking for the architects. You know, they say that type of thing, Brother Reed. That's going to be really beneficial. But we would have to kind of think about who do we first contact as the law firm that might want to hear that. Well, the ones that I'm speaking to right now, if we could start something like that and I handed it to them, I know it would be beneficial to them. And then if we had that opportunity to reach out to architectural firms and say, hey, you know, we got this one, you know, my phone number, my email, everything is on that website. Anything that we can do to build together and strategize and come up with a true successful process, we're all game on this end, Brother Reed.
Yeah. Brother Reginald Hall, I want to thank you.
I want to thank you. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart these last 2 days. I think I mentioned this before, but if not, it gives me hope. It gives me hope to call some family members and say, hey, we had a number of people that heard our story tonight. It gives us hope. We living on hope right now. And we would only want that hope to turn into the fruition of action, implementation, and success. Thank you so much, sister.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank you, YouTube family, for joining me. Tonight is New Year's Eve. And, you know, one tradition for me is, you know, I just pray and thank God for giving me life and blessing my family and being a blessing. So I thank you guys for, you know, being a part of my circle and, you know, being here and we doing this great work together in this lifetime and in this season. So I just want to say thank you to all of you and Happy New Year. And thank you, Mr. Reginald, and we will definitely follow back up with you. We'll give this a little time, and prayerfully these videos can get out. Please share this video. Encourage people to support the island of Sapelo. Let's really spread the word, and we will definitely have you back, Mr. Reginald. So I want to thank you tonight for your time, and God bless, and Happy New Year to you, sir. Uh-oh, you're muted. You're muted. We can't hear you.
Much.
Say it again, sir. We didn't hear you at all.
I was just saying, peace be unto you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. Happy New Year. See you guys next week. Next Tuesday, same time, right here on YouTube. Good night, everybody.